Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. Today, the co-host is Christopher Rosini, and he's with us by Skype as usual. Well, anyway, welcome everybody to the program, and welcome Chris to our program today. Oh, very good. We're going to have a subject today which fascinates me because I've been thinking about it for a long time. I've been fascinated with the monetary issue as long as I can remember, especially as a coin collector at a young age, but also interested in economics and interested in political system, interested in the Bretton Woods Agreement and the gold standard and all these things. But right now, I'm going to continue to talk about, because it's really getting in the news, and that's talking about dollar hegemony. And I believe we're losing it, but it's been a very important principle. It's been around a long time, and it's been a consequence of what happened after World War II. We were very wealthy. We were spared the damaging effect of World War II, and we had all the gold essentially. So we were able to command and control the monetary system, which was deeply flawed. And yet it gave us tremendous power and economic advantages and authority to print money at will and run up debt. And even back in 1945, Henry Hazlitt, a good Austrian economist, predicted that Bretton Woods wouldn't work, and sure enough it did, and that failed in 1971 with the breakdown of Bretton Woods. But dollar hegemony has been around. It has continued, even though it has not had true gold backing to it. It's been related to gold up until 1971, and there has been a back and forth on its value. The value has continued to go down, but it still has been the kingpin around the world. But we're now, Chris, starting to see, the threat to the currency, and I think that big things are going on because we're talking about what is going to substitute for the dollar, and that's what I would like to talk about today. But I'm sure you've thought a little bit about that, and I'd like to get your viewpoint.
Yes, unfortunately, our country, even well before I was even born, decided to go for the empire. And that's where we're at today. But the American empire is not just Americans. There are a lot of foreign accomplices and creditors and partners. There's a lot of people that have to play along. And they do play ball as long as it's in their interest to do so. They'll gladly take American taxpayer money as aid, and they'll allow us to defend their country and pay for it. I mean, who wouldn't take that? What a deal. So they'll do this once it's in their interest. But once an empire overextends, either financially or militarily, people start looking for the exit doors. And while no one wants to be the first out the door, once somebody does jump, it's like a mad rush. It's like dominoes, and we're starting to see that, Dr. Paul.
Yeah, and I think to make that point, all we have to do is look at what the UN did this past week, because they had a vote dealing with support or lack of support for the United States. And that had to do with the Jerusalem situation, because nobody's agreeing with Trump on where the capital should be and this sort of thing. So there's been a rebellion against it. But when the vote came up in the General Assembly of the United Nations, Nikki Haley threatened them and said, you know what, if you don't vote for us, we're going to take your name down, and if you don't do what we tell you, we're going to take your money away. Well, why did we give them the money in the first place is what I would say. But this intimidation, but the amazing thing is they didn't give a hoot. They figured, we don't have to bow to everything the United States tell us, and I think that's a sign. That's a sign of the weakening of the empire and the weakening of the dollar. You wouldn't know that by just looking at the dollar, on the markets right now, because the dollar is holding up against the other currencies. But the political attitude about the United States is we're losing credibility. Credibility is important. It is important that you have a powerful army and a powerful economy to defend a world reserve currency. But I think there are signs all around. I think the subsequent complications coming from the radical inflationism of the QEs, the QE4s that we went through since 2007, I think that is a big event, and I think the consequences are there. And a lot of people would say, why are you worried? The stock market's doing great. And I've always argued that people vote from their bellies. And Trump is not doing well in the political polling. I think it's true. Well, why would that be the case? The economy is booming. Unemployment rates are low. So there's something fictitious about that. And I think that shows, strong evidence of the divisiveness in our country, where those dollars that have been printed are helping a certain group. The rich get richer. And even if they try to make equalizing this, we still have a dollar problem. And I think this week that we saw something interesting, because the Chinese have threatened, it's been going on for years, we're going to replace, the dollar. And of course, they're getting more serious. Matter of fact, as we speak, they're supposed to be issuing their first attempt to gain support for a yuan backed by gold and traded in the markets and buy oil with Chinese yuan. And no, it's not catastrophic. Might not happen real fast, but it's another sign. And their reaction is very simple. Why shouldn't we look for an alternative? Why shouldn't Russia help us? They put sanctions, on us, and we put, conditions. And also Iran. Look at this. Iran wants to join them too. They're lining up. There's a lot of countries say, "Yeah, tell us about it. We're going to pay attention to that." But still, it's not going to be swift. It won't happen tomorrow or next week. But I think there's a sign that's coming that dollar hegemony is going to end. It's getting weaker, and sudden changes can occur. And we are being challenged. And I think that's what is going on right now. I think it's also one of the reasons why people are looking for alternatives. They're looking for Chinese yuan backed by gold. But, the advertisements and the promotion of the cryptocurrencies has a lot to do with their unhappiness with the dollar and transferring dollars, and they're looking for something different. And it remains to be seen how much the cryptocurrency will answer those questions. But I think the fact that cryptocurrencies are there and the price has been bid way up and then they drop is all a reflection of the instability of the precarious nature of our dollar, and the fact that the dollar doesn't have a definition, and that nobody has the true replacement. But ultimately, I think there has to be reform. There has to be a replacement. That doesn't mean a dollar won't exist anymore, but it will have to regain some confidence in order for us to proceed as the reserve currency of the world. But quite frankly, I think the dollar's days are ending as far as being the reserve currency of the world.
Yes, and as Americans, we know what it's like here and what the mentality is. But if we were to put ourselves in foreign shoes and they look at us, our government's $20 trillion in debt. Americans are in debt up to their eyeballs. We have a foreign policy where we just attack nations willy-nilly. Or if you follow our news, one day we're after Iran, the next North Korea, then Ukraine. So why wouldn't they want to get away from this? And it's interesting because you brought up China, and they're doing this oil for gold. But the Chinese and the Russians for years have been stockpiling gold, and people in our camp have been pointing it out that they're buying gold. Meanwhile, here in America and the West, we've all been duped into thinking that gold is not money anymore. Even Ben Bernanke told you that no, gold is not money. Well, we're seeing now what's taking place, Dr. Paul, and there's a big shift happening.
Yes, and there's a move to join and be organized. It's not China alone. This Eurasia Economic Union is what people are joining, and that's what Iran said they want to join, and other countries may well join too, like Turkey may join. And I think that the numbers are building up, and they will have the organization, and they will represent a large segment of the economy, the world economy, and they will have an influence. The big question is how strong are these? That it also blends in with what's called the Shanghai Cooperative Organization. That's been around for a little bit longer time, but it's the same group of people. It's the Far East and South Central Asia. It's the countries that feel like they've been left out and that we dictate to them so often. But our use of sanctions, I think, offend people. Our use of our foreign policy is offensive. And I think our interference around the world is what finally gets people annoyed, and that is why I think there's going to be this move to an alternative. I think it's something that we have to pay attention to, because it is going to affect us. When it really breaks loose, what I think we're going to have is a very much weakening of the U.S. dollar, which means that prices are going to go up and interest rates are going to go up, and then the American people will feel it. Right now, I don't think they feel the problem and don't quite understand it. But I think the thing that'll rip us apart in our country is discrepancy in the wealth distribution, but that was a predictable event. It has been explained in Austrian economics. When a country deliberately and purposely debase their currency and just print it and promise everybody anything, run a welfare warfare state, that it really hurts the middle class, and that's what's happening. The middle class is being wiped out, and it remains to be seen just how successful the tax reforms that they just passed will help. And quite frankly, it's going to help somewhat, but it's not going to solve the problem of what a fiat currency does, and what these problems were that were built into the system, and all that inflation and malinvestment and debt accumulation. This searching for an answer is avoiding the subject. Debt is a problem. The debt will have to be paid for, and we will have to pay for it. We will become poorer as a nation. Matter of fact, they wouldn't even talk about the debt. The only people it seems like in Washington are talking about the deficit are liberal Democrats who just strike me as, I don't think they're really sincere about worrying about the deficit and the debt accumulation, but they're both guilty. And when you're in charge, you don't talk about it. When you're trying to make a point and pander to a few conservatives who do care, but of course there's a few conservatives just recently in Congress were complaining about the proposal on how to get the next year's budget passed, and they were complaining that they're cutting too much money out of the military budget. And these were the conservatives saying, don't cut anything there. And of course, we're back to this whole point about the international conditions that we have, that we foster, and why the dollar is so weak. And that is one of the places where we should really work on it. But that wasn't touched, and it's going to continue. But the market will eventually catch up. We've been drifting along, with a total fiat dollar since 1971. It's worldwide, something that's never been done before, and the end results will come, and they will not go unnoticed. But I think that is what is causing the events that we're talking about, whether it's the Chinese putting it together and having up a Chinese yuan to purchase oil and back it by gold, or whether it's the struggle to find an alternative when you see many, many billions of dollars worth of capitalization in cryptocurrencies. And my position there is, of course, it should be legal and permit people to do it, and if it works, fine. But unfortunately, I see the SEC and the IRS watching very closely about that. True money, if you were going to return to true money, it would be if two people had an exchange of a gold dollar for a service, it would be pretty simplistic compared to all the things going on when you have to fill out the reports for the SEC. So I think that the events right now are showing us how disruptive it is and how important it is that we talk eventually about what kind of reforms are we going to have. And of course, I lean toward something that is tangible and something definable and something that history has proven workable. If we live in a modern age where this is going to change and we never had it before, I'm open to it. But I just happen to be influenced so much with the history of money and the requirement that people have something tangible. And even if you can fool the people for a long time, because there's been nothing tangible about our currency since 1971. It still limps along. But eventually, I think the market will demand that the currency that we deal with will be tangible and convertible into something. That's the way all problems with currency destructions over the many, many centuries has been the restoration of trust. And these events, the ups and downs and confidence in money, have been notorious for thousands of years. The kings and the pharaohs of old would cheat on the gold and the silver, and they even had printed money back in a long time ago. So that's notorious because the government's too much involved. That's why I support this position to moving toward the marketplace, and I would get excited if I saw a cryptocurrency 100% convertible into gold. Now I would sort of be interested in that one.
Yeah, me too, Dr. Paul. And who knows, maybe someday. But I'll finish up. Hopefully we could provide value to our viewers, because this kind of stuff is not going to be on the mainstream media. Many people will be surprised, but it doesn't appear on the media. But outside of our country, there's deals being made, oil deals, economic deals. Countries are using cryptocurrencies to get around U.S. sanctions. I have a few here: Venezuela, Pakistan, Iran, Russia, China, Turkey. They're all changing. And even Saudi Arabia, who our government turns a blind eye to all the time, they're now dealing with Russia for oil. So most of this stuff, this is out of our control. But what is in control is what we do with our own lives. And if we understand what's happening a little bit better, maybe we could prepare a little better. And if we share with others the ideas of liberty, maybe there will be a gold-backed or gold cryptocurrency. Who knows? But as long as it goes in the right direction, I'll be for it.
Oh, very good. And I think people have to realize that the monetary issue is important because it determines the size of government. If you're able to print money out of thin air, and governments have this authority, they do it because they like power and they like influence and they like satisfying people. And you can do that for a long period of time. You can delay the payment. You can borrow money. You can print the money, and you can inflate away the problems. But that only lasts for so long. But the most important reason why they do that is to give government power. But it's based on the flawed concept of Keynesian economics. Deficits don't matter. It's not that they totally ignore it. They talk, well, why worry about a deficit? And it's important that we take care of the people. It's important that we exert ourselves and spread American exceptionalism around the world. And all that is, it's sort of deceiving oneself if they believe this is the case. But so it's a philosophic issue, it's a power issue, and it's wishful thinking. But I think if we want to live in a free society with the goal being liberty, I think we have to think, we cannot ignore the principles of the moral principles which give us a sound currency. And the founders understood it, and unfortunately we haven't taken any of their advice on very many things. So one day, because this to me is interesting, because I believe, of course, that we will address this issue, and we're doing it more every day, and I think the events we just talked about emphasize this. Chris, I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Very good, and I want to thank our viewers for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.